How do you know it doesn't work if you don't try it? I hate this line of bullshit. I hate this line of bullshit, and here's why. The idea implies that we don't know anything about the human body. It implies that those of us who've spent a great deal of time studying exercise science, human biomechanics, sports nutrition, that all of it is meaningless because you can just try random things because one guy somewhere did it as part of what he did and got results. So therefore, why shouldn't we try it? Well, the reason a lot of us shouldn't just try any stupid thing that comes along. It's a good reason. Because a lot of us, we do this for a career. I coach for a living. Okay? Let me make that clear. I coach for a living. If I don't have pretty good evidence that something works, and I mean good evidence, tried and true, tested, I'm not willing to jeopardize my income having my athletes do stupid shit. Okay? And I'm not saying we shouldn't be open-minded, guys. We should be open-minded to new concepts. There's nothing wrong with that. In fact, again, a lot of things have had to be tried. New stuff has to be tried to find out if it works. But who's going to find that? Is it going to be this one guy who works out by himself and starts an Instagram, who doesn't coach, doesn't have a bunch of people to experiment on? Do you really think he's going to be the one that discovers the next new thing? It worked for him. It worked for me. Well, how do you know this hasn't been tried and compared to other stuff already by coaches who have 50 athletes or 100? Did you bother to look? Did you bother to look before you jumped up and said, well, it seemed to work for my favorite influencer. He said we should do one all-out set of rest pause training on the back squat after pre-exhausting our quads with leg extensions. Yeah, this silly shit was disproven 20 years ago. What's his genetics look like and how high is his drug stack? If he got amazing results doing that, I don't want to know what his training looks like, as we know his training is stupid. I want to see that guy's drug stack. Like, if he got big quads doing that silly shit, I want to know how much tren and anadrol he's using. I already know he's using them. I want to see his doses. I want to see his blood work. Because that's some stupid shit that's been shown to cause piss poor muscle growth in the lab. And nobody outside of certain little fad bodybuilding circles even bothers with stuff like that. And that's what I mean. Well, if you haven't tried it, really, we don't need to try it. We don't need to try every new thing that comes along. And again, there's nothing wrong with experimenting, but if you don't have a mechanism by which you think something is going to work, right? They can't biologically explain to you the mechanisms in a way that's consistent with the way that we know the human body works, then we don't have time for it. I don't have time for it. My lifters don't have time for it. You don't have time for it. Right? We live in an age where there is access to information and data. We live in an age where the best coaches in the world put out tons of information. We live in a world where the best sports nutritionists and the best experts in nutritional science give free information. We don't have to just try random silly stuff. It's not necessary. And at the very least, if someone's going to tell you, hey, you need to try this, they need to explain the mechanism of action. I get that all the time in my inbox. Hey, Jason, have you tried this? I'm like, well, why would that work better than what I'm already doing? Look at the joint angles of it. Look at what you just suggested I do. Look at the biomechanics of it. Look at the range of motion of the muscles, and you tell me that that's going to cause the same hypertrophy that I'm already getting. It's going to give less. for that same movement pattern. It's going to produce an inferior training response. It'll be a decent training response, but it's worse than what I do right now. But you just have to try it. No, we don't. Now, if you've got a good reason, you can look at it, because sometimes we see that. We'll see a good coach out there. We'll say, hey, I have found that my athletes, my people get really good results if I incorporate this one technique, or about 2/3 of them do. Because is it always all of them, right? Come on, let's be realistic here. All right, I'm going to be real skeptical. If something fairly new comes out that works for all of them, that's a big red flag. Somebody's bullshitting you. Most of my athletes seem to get pretty good results when we make this one change. We increase their monounsaturated fats. We incorporate bands with our dynamic effort work. Most of them, not all, most of them seem some improvement. And then they can explain to you, you look at it and go, well, it makes sense. Okay, I see what he's doing here. All right, it makes sense. Maybe a lot of these athletes were deficient in vitamin E, and he's got them eating this almond butter, and they're getting more vitamin E in their diet now. It's a common deficiency. And they're getting better recovery, right? They're recovering better. Their connective tissue's recovering better. Okay, yeah, that makes sense, right? Okay, yeah, since, we're training compensatory acceleration and we're dealing with the bands, we might be getting an overspeed eccentric, creating a larger stretch reflex because, okay, this kind of makes sense. It looks silly if you haven't heard of something like that. But that's examples of things that might seem a little bit out there to people who aren't aware of them. That you could look at that and see a mechanism of action, especially if they can explain it to you. And a bunch of their athletes are getting good results doing it. Okay. If it's suggested to you by a proven coach, I'm not going to discount if Louis Simmons or Boris Shako says, hey, my people get results doing this. Because, there's a point where when you coach more than 50 elite world-class level athletes, your opinion's probably worth a lot more than the guy on Instagram. Let's just be honest. Hell, their opinion's probably worth more than mine. I mean, I can admit that, right? I think my opinions are pretty good. I think I have the best information channel on YouTube for strength. But let's be realistic here. Those guys hold a hell of a lot of opinion. I'm friends with Chris Duffin. If Chris Duffin says something, I'm going to pay attention because of who he is and what he has accomplished and what his athletes accomplish. That's going to hold a little more weight than a guy who doesn't train anyone, who just got really good results with his anecdote. All right? Especially when they can explain the mechanism of action. That's what got me into the barefoot training. I mean, a perfect example, listening to Duffin. I've been really happy with it, right? I've been actually really happy with the barefoot training, and he got me doing it a couple years ago. It made sense to me personally, the way he explained it, and with him doing it himself, and I ran with it, and it works well for me. Is it a game changer? No. Okay, and it's okay to try new things in those situations. Nothing wrong with that. But I'm not going to try some silly new shit because some guy in a comment section or some influencer who does not coach, that's not what they do for a living, says you should try this. You can't say it doesn't work if you don't try it. It's just some random thing they've come up with. They claim worked for them. And they can't even explain a mechanism of action or compare it to other things. Right? They don't have comparative data. No one gives a shit, and you shouldn't give a shit. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.